I want to talk magic. Magic, and I'm not talking about the gathering. So, yeah. What's magic is the human mind. You see, my life is like a discovery. I can't even really put into words what it's like to be me today. It's a very, very fascinating experience. The main thing that I would say is the most profound aspect of my experience is, a progression of clarity where, you hear a lot about limiting beliefs. And that is, a very profound thing. And really what's missing in the world of psychology is a broadening of the lens from the focus on, emotions to the continuum of the experience of being, a dance between a world experienced outside of oneself and the occurrence of the necessity, the existence of a self based on the occurrence of what's taking place outside of oneself. That rather than trying to continue to address the feelings, we need to address what's at the source of the external experience. Because without addressing that, we have no mechanism to which to transform the experience of the self. That you can give advice, you can try to fix and change and improve, but you see all this self-improvement, all this desire to fix and change is failing to recognize that the motive for fixing and changing and improving is based on the way the world occurs to be to someone and what that occurrence means to that someone about that someone. And the transformation of self has nothing to do with changing or fixing self. It has to do with transforming the world the self resides within. That the self is occurring as a necessity, a flight to safety within the familiarity of ways of being and existing within a world that occurs to be a particular way. And so the work that we do is the work of dealing with the world occurring to the individual. That the feelings are not important. They're merely informative. They're merely to be acknowledged, because when we put them all together, we see their profound associations with statements which are often confused as feelings themselves. Statements like, there's something wrong with me. Statements like, I don't know. Statements like, I'm not good enough, or I'm broken. And we call those feelings because people feel things when they think those things, but the thoughts themselves are merely pattern recognition, are merely the result of an interpretation of circumstance. And that interpretation is a reproduction of pattern recognition in childhood, that very specific moments gave rise to the genesis of identity, that the child made a transition from being a being that required childproofing to being a self that had experienced its first failure to be, meaning that being was no longer going to cut it, that it had to understand its world in order to survive it, and it had to create new ways to be within this world. And this was a conscious process. This was a process of understanding and figuring out what had went wrong. That there was a moment that this came to be, a moment where the child thought for the first time that there's something wrong here. There's something wrong with me. And the child looked and looked and looked and listened to the parents and reviewed the circumstances in an effort to quell the confusion arising from the pain of this experiential failure. And the words that the child used to describe themselves as something's wrong with me or I'm not good enough became attached to the emotional experiences of that moment. And the child decided, I have to figure it out. I have to be perfect. And gave rise to an automatic way of responding to the perception of reality. And the perception of reality became patternized and connected with this new way to be in the world. A way that would be sensitive to circumstances and situations that could be recognized as having similarities with this original experience, where the original emotional states would become a powerful deterrent to failure. And if failure occurred, you would be plunged into those same emotions that would then inspire you to regroup and improve the execution of your perfectionism. Or if you succeeded, you would be rewarded with happiness, the happiness that was displaced by those emotions that became attached to, I'm not good enough, a perpetual catalyst of self-improvement and fixing. And so, as the being moves through life surviving, they're surviving a recreated perpetuation of childhood with the same ways of being and the same smallness in relationship to the bigness of the parents that gets projected onto reality itself. And so the I'm not good enough is not an emotion. It's an assignment of identity, an identity the being is so desperate to overcome, disprove, fix, or change. And as we view the human experience through the lens of psychology, failing to recognize that lens is the same lens of a person that went to school to try to fix themselves in the same manner and now is trying to fix and understand other people and is now fixated on what they perceive to be the problem, and that would be the feelings, the emotions, without seeing the continuum, without seeing the possibility of a world existing beyond the boundaries of the imagined world of a 7-year-old child. And so we're merely cheerleading each other in an effort to fix, change, and overcome ourselves, fix or change reality, trying to immunize ourselves from the judgment of others that we attribute to the causality of the experience of my own being not good enough or broken. And that's it.